Well, welcome everyone. Uh, really glad to be here on this first ever Diverse We Run panel conversation. Tonight we'll be talking about safety and inclusion. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm glad everyone can be here. My name is Carolyn Sue. I am the creator of the Diverse We Run Instagram account. I started Diverse We Run about 1.5 years ago because I knew that the running community is comprised of many different kinds of people and different runners from many different ethnicities and backgrounds whose lived experiences of running really are complex and multifaceted, and also is directly impacted, by our race and our culture. But our journeys, our stories, challenges, and our goals weren't really being talked about or acknowledged really in the largely white-centered norms and narratives in the running world. So I created Diverse We Run to give a spotlight, to give space, really to give a platform, for runners of color, to have our journeys seen, to have our stories told, and to have our needs recognized. Because the running community is not homogenous. And when we can see the world as it truly is, which is comprised of a multitude of diverse journeys, it really benefits all of us. And the differences that are demonstrated in the running community are reflective of and shaped by the differences and the disparities of our world at large. And we really can't talk about making social change if we don't recognize the differences that exist in the community here that's closest to us. So it is such a privilege really and an honor to have these 5 amazing athletes as our panelists here today. We have Tammy Shakur, Connie Shih, Danae Doramy, Ezra Williams, and Darrell Patterson. And in a few minutes, they're all going to introduce themselves. And then also during our time here tonight, if you do have any questions that you think of, please feel free to type that into the Q&A box, which is different from the chat box. We just want to be able to keep track of all of the questions that do come in. Yeah, I know I've been talking about Diverse We Run a lot, but really this panel would not exist if it were not for 2 amazing women, Natalie Mitchell and Shawanna White. And Natalie is going to give her introduction in a few seconds. Shawanna is actually running a 50K race right now, of course. And so she will be hopping on after she completes the race, probably with a medal or a podium win in some degree. Shawanna is currently living in South Carolina. She is the 5th fastest American-born, African-American female marathoner here in the US. She is a physical education teacher whose life's work really is to empower the next generation of future leaders and runners. So we're really excited for you guys to all meet her when she's able to come on. And now we'll go over to Natalie.
Thank you, Carolyn. I mean, this is like really cool that we can all be together. So hi, everyone. Oh man, I mean, we were really overwhelmed by the extreme positive response that we've gotten about this panel. And it makes us really happy just to gather here tonight. So I'll tell you a little bit about me for those of you who don't know me. I'm Natalie Mitchell. I live in Los Angeles. I'm a 12-time marathoner and mom to 3 crazy kids. And I'm a running coach. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about how we came up with this idea to do this amazing panel of diverse athletes. So Carolyn, Shawanna, and I were on a panel with Strong Runner Chicks. They did a women's empowerment panel at the beginning of July. And right after the panel ended, we had such a meaningful conversation that we immediately started DMing each other and talking about the possibility of doing something like this. And so it quickly turned into this amazing idea. And we just kept going back and forth and planning and putting it all together. And I'm just really honored to be part of it with Carolyn and Shawanna, who's running, of course. I mean, she's amazing. I just wanted to say that, you know, we felt like, especially right now with the climate of the world and what's happening, and especially what's happening in the world that affects us as runners, we knew that there wasn't a lot of representation of runners of color, that we were hearing their stories, and we felt like that was so important, and that's why we wanted to start this. So these 5 amazing athletes, who you may or may not know, or just excited to, I don't want to talk about me, I want to talk about them. So we're excited. Thank you for being here.
Why don't we go around right now to have each panelist introduce themselves? Tammy, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I am Tammy Shakur. I am here in the Southeast. I'm about an hour outside of Atlanta, in the country. And I've been running on and off since high school, long distance running. But I didn't pick it up as a lifelong habit until I got into the military, which was kind of forced at that time. But it's been a passion I've picked up on and off throughout the years as life ebbed and flowed. So I have 3 adult children now, so life is flowing a lot better right now. So I'm able to focus on running a lot more. So my day job is as a program director. I work in the health and wellness industry, but my passion project, or my real job, as I would call it, is connecting people to nature via outdoor nature-inspired activities, primarily communities of color and women, just to, again, experience nature and to connect to that for wellness and for just general exercise and health purposes. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Connie, why don't you go next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Connie Xie, and a little bit about me. In my personal life, I am a full-time mother to 2 wonderful children, 1 5-year-old and 1 1-year-old. I mean, they're like 1.5 and 5.5, really. So they're that in between. They really don't feel like 1 and 5. And then professionally, I am a college and career counselor, and I have also coached cross country for high school students for the last 4 years. And then related back to the personal part about where I connect with running, I've been running since high school. Well, middle school kind of, but middle school was kind of like that testing ground with my parents, really, to make sure that they were okay with it. And then high school was when they figured out that I was going to do it anyway. And so in the running part of my life, I've been at Boston running the marathon since 2014, which has been a goal since high school. And that is a huge, it's a huge accomplishment, at least from what I feel from my girlhood, and also as a way to pay tribute to my coach, who was one of my biggest inspirations back then, and even now. And then I also cracked the 3-hour barrier back in 2017 before I had my second child, and I'm looking forward to doing more of that and much faster. So that's me in the running and professional world. And then why I'm doing this, I feel really compelled to talk about diversity with running, primarily because I put myself in this kind of a space, and it's because I love it. And I know that so many people do. And yet it's not something that necessarily feels inclusive of all of the people that love it so much. And that's part of what I want to talk about today.
And now, Danae. Okay.
Yeah. Yat she dene dormi nishye tabahan nishlin nakai dene bashashin totsoni dashache nakai dene dashanali. Hi everyone, my name is Danae Dormi. I am a citizen of the Navajo Nation. So I just introduced myself in my language. For us, it's really custom in Navajo culture to introduce yourself to new people, new friends, new relatives, to make connections and understand sort of where one another comes from. So I just basically said my clans. My family is living here currently in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So that's where I was born and raised. My mom's family, though, comes from Fort Defiance, Arizona. So that's where most of my family resides on the reservation. And then my dad's family comes from southern New Mexico, and we're of Mexican, Spanish, and Yaqui descent as well. So for me, I have been a lifelong runner, and I am lucky to have been raised by two lifelong runners. I ran cross country through high school and was never really the fastest or most talented runner on my team growing up, but I was lucky enough to have my dad be the track coach at my high school, and he ran collegiately, and he was also my basketball coach. And so I think for me, running was more of a recreational pursuit for a long time. And as an adult, so my day job is that I work in college access. I currently am an associate director of College Horizons, which is a national nonprofit that serves Native American, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian students as they apply to college, and then also graduate and professional school as well. And I previously worked as a college admission officer, and that was an incredibly stressful job that really pushed me, I would say, on a day-to-day basis. And for me, a huge stress relief was running. And I felt like I got to fall back in love with running through, just going and training for a half marathon right in the middle of college application reading season. And I think that choice helped me understand what running could do for me personally. And on top of that, running is deeply tied to my culture. And so I had been running my entire life, partially because my parents have instilled that in me as a value in our household, that is a way to stay healthy, stay disciplined, to stay active, to stay connected to the land around us, but also to understand that my ancestors were runners, and that was something that we honor as a way to connect, to pray, to experience the land. So for me, I think as an Indigenous person, running is something I feel like I have to do and I was born to do, and that I am excited to sort of share that journey with others out there. So yeah, I'm really grateful to the panelists and to the women who put this together today to talk more about these issues that we face as people of color, Indigenous people, Black people in running, and what that means for us to go, out into the world today and be doing that. So yeah, I think that's all I've got, but I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thanks, Danae. All right, next, I think we have Ezra.
Hey, hello everybody. Happy to be here, excited to be on this panel on this Saturday afternoon. Ezra Williams, currently living in the Phoenix, Arizona area, so dealing with a lot of heat this time of the year in the summer. About me as a person, so married and have 4 kids that keep me busy throughout the day, every day of the year. By day, I work in technology for a technology company in sales. I've been doing that for about 20 years or so now. Running wise, I've been running essentially all my life. Started out doing kind of sprints and shorter distances in junior high and high school, 100 meters, 200, 400 relays. It wasn't until after I graduated college and got a real job and got a little bit of money and started eating and eating well, I would say, and put on a few pounds. I started running as a way to lose weight and get back in shape. So I started doing some distance running. I think at the age of 30, I did my first marathon. Since then, I think I'm up to 12 full marathons and probably 25 or 30 or so half marathons. Working my way around to the World Marathon Majors. I've done Chicago, Boston twice, New York last year, and hopefully when the world opens up again, I can go travel and do the internationals and get those out of the way. But just happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion this afternoon.
Awesome. Thanks, Ezra. And lastly, but not least, Darrell.
Thank you. I just first want to say thank you to the host. I think this is a great opportunity. It's a great discussion, and I certainly feel honored to be invited to this discussion, to the table. My name is Darrell Patterson. I am a runner. I would call myself a marathoner. It's just my favorite distance. I guess I'm relatively new to the sport. I ran my first ever road race in 2012. And then from that point on, I think I became addicted to the sport, and my level of commitment has just increased over the years. Outside of running, I work at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta as a financial statistics specialist. I also am one of the co-founding partners of the race, half marathon and 5K, and I serve on the board of the Atlanta Track Club. I'm a husband and father of two boys, 8 and 9-year-old. They certainly keep us busy. We have a very active family. I am a first generation runner. Running certainly isn't in my family, but it is something that we're passing forward. So I'm fortunate to have an active wife, and we are blessed to have 2 active boys as well.
Thank you guys so much for those awesome introductions. We're really excited to get started. So I'm going to start us off with the first question, and that is, what does inclusion in running mean to you? And how does safety, feeling safe, relate to that inclusion? So Tammy, will you start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Inclusion in running to me means that I am primarily a trail runner, which means I spend long hours running in wooded and rural spaces. So safety is obviously, every runner's concern, but there is some heightened sense of concern around safety when you are in spaces with less visibility and a lot more natural and maybe unseen, I won't say dangers, but things that you need to consider. So inclusion in running to me, I think it's probably no secret that diversity in trail running lags a bit behind road running, where I'm sure there are concerns there as well, but trail running can be a very lonely sport for minorities. So inclusion to me is really the difference between being invited into a space. We hear all the time, well, running is for everyone. You just show up and lace up and you just do it. It's the difference between being invited into a space and feeling welcomed and seen in that space, feeling that your voice has equal, that your personhood has been considered in that space, things that may be of concern or uniquely concerned for you as a person have been considered, that you have equal voice in that community, equal representation, that you have equal access to resources, and that you're represented in that space. Carolyn, you made a great point about what, the running community is not homogenous. We're runners of color. We've been here. We've always been running, but we don't see that in marketing. And I think you made another great point in that if that benefits all of us. I think a lot of times as a trail runner, I have some of my biggest concerns. I think most people would think, oh, it's not the bear attacks or the natural disasters. It's encountering people who don't expect to see my brown face in that space. So when we all see representation in marketing of the full breadth of what the running community looks like, I think that could impact a lot of the stigma that we have, or some of the interactions, that unpleasant interactions or microaggressions and things that we see in that community. So inclusivity, again, means to me that, those things have been considered. If I'm going into an organization, into a sport, into a running group, if the work of being inclusive has not been done, that can, in some ways, feel like an unsafe space, and it can be a harmful space. When that work hasn't been done and it's not represented in the sport, first and foremost, it impacts the level of participation. If I don't see people who look like me in that sport, I'm not likely to participate in that, which means those of us who have the fortitude or just the sheer insanity and want to do it anyway, you're oftentimes in a space where you don't have community. And when you are a minority and you don't have community, there's already an inherent sense of otherness and feeling unsafe in those spaces. So add to that, if those organizations haven't done that work internally, or sports haven't done that work internally, there may be members of that community who don't even know that their behaviors can be harmful. So the heavy lifting tends to be on the minority, the other, that enters into these spaces. So, again, if the work of being inclusive is not done, it's harmful to the entire running community because it does not adequately represent what the community looks like. But it's particularly harmful for people who are who would be the minority in those spaces, because they are left trying to make sure their voice is heard, making sure that their safety concerns are considered, or that, as those microaggressions or disparities or profiling types of activities happen, the heavy burden of heavy lift is on that person to do that work. And that impacts their enjoyment of the sport, that impacts how they contribute to the sport. And we know that, everyone brings value to the sport. So when we have people who don't feel comfortable and they choose to walk away, or, this just isn't for me, or it's just, that sport loses as a whole, because they've lost a very valuable voice. So that's what it means to me.
Tammy, I love that, how really when, what you're saying, when people don't feel like they have a space of belonging and they don't show up, then really it's the sport as a whole who loses, right? This is just that one other aspect and one other person of that community. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. Connie, what about you?
So when I think about just that word inclusion, I think about how inclusion is impossible without safety. I think about inclusion as like that culture, cultivating that culture of belonging. And of course, you can't belong if you just don't feel space that's safe to even enter. And I think a lot about this because this spans even beyond running, right? Like running is a space. There's also so many other spaces in which inclusion, while there might be an effort there to invite people into a space, it really doesn't feel for those that are being invited to necessarily feel that sense of belonging. And specifically when I think about running and that sense of belonging, though, I think about what is represented in the media that is not true of what I see in running for who is coming into running spaces, running clubs, who's coming into races and all that kinds of things. So things like body shape, like speed, like skin color, like brands, right? There are so many different things that are not truly included in running that necessarily foster this sense of belonging. And before that, even, I think about a lot of missed opportunities to even enter into the space who actually feel safe to go and run. As a high school cross-country coach, I think a lot about whether or not my students do feel safe to just lace up and run, as some people might say. Running is so easy. You just put on shoes, lace up, head out the door, and go. And that's also not inclusive if you think about body sizes, thinking about like who feels safe wearing whatever it might be, who has the gear, who has access to that gear, and feels equipped to just go out and run. It's not really just about shoes. It's about shoes. It's about what you wear. Do you have the moisture wicking shirt? But also, do you have a supportive sports bra, right? Do you feel safe to run without a shirt on? And there are a lot of things that don't necessarily feel normalized right now. And Tammy named it, where there's essentially like a look to running, and that doesn't foster the sense from top down to what belonging can feel like. There are plenty of people opting in, but who is opting in doesn't then meet that look that is also being marketed. And that is really detrimental because it fosters this sense of you may not be enough. That safety can mean one thing in terms of physical safety. Do I feel safe to run because there might be the threat of physical violence to me? But then there's also the sense of safety of, do I feel like I'm not going to be bullied? I'm not going to be questioned in some way for my presence in this space, for my doing this activity. And I think that there have been more than enough examples of people, just everyday people, feeling like they are questioned for just going out and running.
That's really powerful. I mean, I think that was one of the reasons why we really wanted to have this type of conversation, because there's so many people that feel this way. And I think it's important because running is such an amazing community of people, of all different types of people. And I think it's important, and we haven't had these conversations before. And I think, so this is wonderful. Danae, can you go next and tell us how you feel?
Yeah, I think Connie touched on something really important, and that's that this stretches beyond running. I think in the current state of our world, but also for a long time, specifically, I'm referencing our United States, where we're located. I think we have a lot of reckoning to do with sort of the history that we are living among and because of and with every day in our country. I think until we recognize, narratives and history, honest truths that we have to deal with, right? This country has basically been founded on genocide, theft of the land, enslavement. There's a lot of truths that I think nationally, these are conversations that are happening, but in nearly every field, there's not going to be a lot of progress until people really wrestle with those truths and can name them and talk about them. So for me, when I think about inclusion in running, I think very much about inclusion of the land, actually, and how little we talk about it as a space that is heavily used in the running community. We can't run unless we have a ground to run on, right? And what does that mean? And so I think as an Indigenous runner, for me, it goes, yes, I think about road races and things like that, but I also think about how many Native people were already traveling this land far before us, and continue to. So Native people I always say Native people have been and continue to be the stewards of the land. And what does it mean that we all occupy this space? And what does it mean that this space was also sort of shaped and formed often by sort of white Eurocentric narratives in a lot of these communities. So I think I always do my best to center the land in these conversations as a Native runner, and think about why I'm able to do this and being grateful for that, and understanding that in road racing, we're not always going to get like a land acknowledgement, right? From running communities, from groups, from race directors. And I always push for that and advocate for that, because I think it's important that we're connecting with the tribal communities around and nearby as sort of a base point, like as a starting point to have these conversations of, what it means to live here and occupy and run on this space, and what it means to feel safe as a person of color on this space, I think. So when I think about road races specifically, I also spend a lot of time talking about how, for me, I think about mental safety a lot. And when I show up to a road race, oftentimes road races are centered around holidays, specifically national holidays, right? The 4th of July, Thanksgiving. For a lot of people, these can be violent holidays. These can be holidays that hold a lot of violent histories. And so when you show up and there are people sort of dressed in costume, right, as pilgrims and Indians, or perhaps celebrating patriotism, you know, for the United States. I think I spend a lot of time as a Native person wondering like what I'm going to see that morning when I show up to a road race, whether that's a 5K or, you know, a 10K or a half marathon or whatever. And I'm trying really hard to focus on my goals for that day, but it can get really distracting, and I don't always feel super safe in that space, and wondering, am I going to give energy to this today? And so I figure if I'm having this experience, there have to be other Indigenous runners out there having that experience, and other runners of color having that same experience, and trying to juggle a whole lot of different things as they think about safety and inclusion and what we can be doing. It's not always just about representation, but it's also about acknowledgement of the land, the resources, you know, the histories that we all stand on in order to, you know, be running here, and what that means for us and our families as runners of color. So that's kind of the position that I'm sort of forming my thoughts around this on. But I really appreciate and resonate with all, you know, I resonate with a lot of the things that Tammy and Connie mentioned as well.
Really powerful. I mean, I feel like I'm learning so much about just people's feelings and backgrounds. And I mean, so much of what you said, Danae, I didn't know. And I feel like probably so many people feel the same way. And it's wonderful to have your voice to talk about that. So thank you so much for sharing. And I'm excited to keep talking. So I want to call on Ezra next. And I just want to say something. So, you know, I feel like in our country, like, so the whole situation with Ahmaud Arbery happened, right? And everything just blew up. And everyone just started talking, and it just, you know, it started this whole conversation about running and safety and all of that. And I kind of felt like, to be honest, I sort of felt, as a Black woman in America, I felt in a different minority category. So I didn't feel like I felt unsafe when I went for a run. And and I say these words carefully because it's a very sensitive subject, you know what I mean? And so I never felt like it was a problem. I literally just put on my shoes and went for a run. And so this has been so interesting. And this is the reason why I wanted to really be part of leading this, because I felt like at the end of the day, it didn't matter if I felt safe. If everybody else doesn't feel safe, then it's my responsibility to help make that difference. And so I want to call on Ezra. He and I was saying, met at the Phoenix Marathon last year. And, and so that was wonderful. We had, you know, known each other online, and then we were able to meet. And so that was a wonderful experience. But I also wanted to say, so my husband, Gerald, and I, we did a talk right after everything happened with Ahmaud. And we were both talking about, very honestly and openly, about our feelings of the situation, and how, you know, what our experiences were. And so, and then Ezra and I kind of had a little bit of dialogue. I'm going to let you take over, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And I appreciate all the previous comments from the other panelists around inclusion. And I know we're going to talk about safety and kind of how we feel about safety a little more later, but just to add a little bit on the inclusion piece. I mean, it's a simple topic or ask. I mean, just looking at the definition of inclusion, really it's just, you know, a person or thing being included in a larger group or structure, right? With that structure that we're talking about today being running. So for running, it's, you know, regardless of what your ability is, whether you're a sub-3 marathoner or a 6-hour marathoner, whether you're 100 pounds or 300 plus pounds, or you're 20 years old or 70 years old, you're male or female, or whatever your race is, you should feel like you are included in this community, and your thoughts and your needs and your desires matter to the community. And safety should be a part of that as well. So regardless of who you are in the running community, you should be in a place, hopefully, where you feel physically safe, emotionally safe, and even spiritually safe. So it's a simple topic, but it's something that's a lot harder to put into practice. And again, appreciate all the comments from all the others that they've said, and, you know, I think they've covered it very well on the inclusion piece.
Thanks, Ezra. Yeah, I'm excited to keep talking. I know that's going to go into our second question, but before we get to that, I really want to hear from Darrell. So, Darrell.
Thanks. Yeah, I resonate with a lot of what everyone has said, and I'll try not to rehash their comments just for out of respect of time. But I think everyone made points that I really resonated with, and I think that for me, inclusion really means that like the outward projection of the sport should reflect the diversity of its participants. And I think that's something that that hopefully comes out in this discussion. I think that's a space for us to work on. I think that for the sport to outwardly reflect the diversity of its participants, people need to feel safe to bring their whole selves to the sport. And I know for a fact that's not the case. Because of the diversity, oftentimes, and I know in the Black community, we have a phrase that we use so often called code switching, where you're basically, which is really just a euphemism for diminishing aspects of your personality or hiding parts of yourself so that you can fit in with whatever the dominant culture is. And I think so often people of color or people who are in any sort of minority position, whether it be because of your sex, your religion, your sexual preference, oftentimes we find ourselves sort of trying to put those aspects of ourselves to the side for fear that we'll be persecuted, whether that be physically in some cases or socially ostracized or emotionally subjecting ourselves to people's comments. We find ourselves hiding that part of ourselves, and that is a reflection of people not feeling safe in the sport. I think as we increase that safety, if people feel safe to bring their whole self to the sport, then we all benefit by learning from each other and supporting each other and letting each other know that this is a space where you can be who you are, and we're going to love you for who you are and appreciate the diversity, which is really a beautiful thing to bring to the sport. So I would just say what everyone else said and then that.
Oh, that's really powerful. And I think there's so many good points here. I mean, we should feel comfortable bringing our whole self to the table and knowing that, you know, that our differences are going to be appreciated. And I think that'll just help the sport tremendously. Okay, so with that said, I will go into question 2, which I think I jumped the gun a little bit talking about the day-to-day safety, but our question 2 is, in your day-to-day as a BIPOC, when you lace up for your runs, do you feel safe while running? And if you can tell us why or why not. Tammy, if you can start us off.
That's a loaded question. I would say, generally speaking, I do. I relate to your sentiment around being a Black female and running. It was you know, some of the recent situations that have really expanded my viewpoint on some of the issues that are that have come up with like our Black male runners or runners of our community. So I would say primarily I tend to feel safe, but I tend to stay in places where I am comfortable. So I tend to stick to routine. These are places where people know my face, and I'm not going to surprise them when they see me. They know that's Tammy. She's on the trail. She does this trail, you know, often. Or I have been very intentional about building community when trail running is an inherently introverted sport, I would say. So we are inclined to enjoy a nice solo run here and there. So, but I've been very intentional just because I understand the benefit of having community when you are venturing into spaces that are new to you, or where, you know, there's safety in numbers. So I've been very intentional about building community. So I would say primarily I do, again, but it's because I've built a routine and I've intentionally built a community that look, that I feel comfortable in and provides a sense of safety for me. I am prone to wander and I love taking on new adventures. So it's not uncommon for me to see a race out west and, it just sounds great to me. And I want to go run in the backcountry of Colorado. Those are adventures that I would say in the past, I probably without fail thought, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to go do that or give it a try. In today's current climate, I do have some heightened sensitivity around safety and whether I would just be so glib in taking on some of those types of activities now. I'm fortunate to have a community that's spread across the United States. So there's typically another warm body that tends to like the things that I like that I can engage to and, encourage them to join me on that adventure. But day to day, I would say yes. But again, it's because I've built this safe community for me to run in. I think if I were just venturing out into new spaces or, there's always for me, again, I mentioned trail running is not a very diverse sport. So if you're showing up to a group run or a trail race, you are probably going to be one of, if not the only brown face there. So there is always some additional sense of, is this a safe place to run? Is this race in, rural South Carolina, or is it in, just a local trail here in Atlanta? So it does take some due diligence to do some research and understand where I may be running if I'm running outside of these safe spaces that I've built for myself or created for myself. I am more inclined to do a lot more research now. There are some spaces that I know I'm just not comfortable in unless I'm with other people. So yes and no. And again, very loaded question.
Tammy, as you're describing the safety that you feel now, it's also very striking that you have, like you said, intentionally built that community and intentionally built that routine in which, people who might see you on the trail now, they're not going to be surprised seeing what you described earlier, like seeing your brown face, right? Like show up on the trail, and how, that is something that is factored into consideration. And just even, describing how you have to take into consideration the location of various events and races, just considering, the kind of like the social climate there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that anyone here, if anyone happens to be a race director here who is like listening and tuning in, or even just running groups in general, like I think these are all really great, important things to consider. So thank you, Tammy. So why don't we go to Connie next? How do you feel about safety in the day-to-day?
To be perfectly honest, for the most part, in my day-to-day running, whether it was high school up until now, most of what I am very aware of is my being a small female. Not necessarily being a person of color. I'm 5'3" on a good day, if I'm standing super straight. And part of it is because of my parents always being super worried why they didn't really want me to participate in sports. They're just like, but you're small. And that more than anything is what I think about. In high school, especially growing up in, I was born and raised in the South Bay, and especially in the South Bay, it gets really hot during the summer, like easily over 100 degrees, very dry heat. And it was just a pretty normalized thing to be okay to just take your shirt off. No, at least on the team, it was like, you never catcall. You never say anything about a person's body. It's cool if the boys take their shirts off because it's 100+ degrees, fine. Girls too. We just didn't comment on each other's bodies. And I just thought not too much of it for a while, I guess, because I was young and I, again, just didn't think too much about it. Then I guess as I got older, catcalls would happen I frequently ran without a shirt on while pregnant and running. Would also get some really demeaning comments for running with a big belly and a shirt off. And again, that just brings me back to this sense of, as a female, there is a consideration for what it means to be safe that intersects with being a person of color. And I'll admit that I feel very much that sense of being female before I feel that sense of female and a person of color when I'm out running. So my safety feels, for the most part, like, yeah, it's there. But like Tammy, I feel like that question's really loaded. It depends on where it is that I'm running. I too, because of, I feel like way back when, from all of the things that my parents used to tell me about, I'm a creature of comfort. I don't go to places that I don't know very well, unless I know people that are going to be running with me. And now with the shelter in place for my county in the Bay Area, I'm not going anywhere. So I go out my door and I run the same places. Sure, cat calls can still happen, but at least I can say, okay, well, that happened in my community. Okay, but that's a planned route. I know it for the most part. I feel very comfortable and safe because this is something that I've plotted, mapped out, run any number of times. I can probably get a local legend designation in Strava and it makes me feel good, but that's what makes me feel safe. And then my husband also doesn't then have to worry, well, what could have happened?
That makes a lot of sense, Connie. I'm just curious, actually, with the pandemic and COVID and you being an Asian American female, very clearly, have you felt like that has impacted your sense of safety at all, or not really, because of your, consistent route and knowing your neighborhood and community?
To be honest, it hasn't for me as much, but because when I'm masked up, and it might be harder to tell with the lighting right now, my complexion is not as light as my parents actually are. So my parents, I worry about their safety. They worry about their safety. They also speak with accents. And they have actually had some real fears around discrimination. I, on the other hand, have actually been discriminated against because some people actually thought that I was brown. And brown meaning, some kind of ambiguous mislabeling of being potentially Latinx, which is also very revealing of just some biases that those people have as well. So again, like, this is just if I were to mask up, wear sunglasses, I tan really easily. And so there's an aspect of like, you don't see my face, but you see the color of my skin. And there's what I don't experience from my parents, but I might be experiencing in a very strange kind of crossover. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. Next, how about, I think, Danae?
Yeah. So I think for me, I want to say yes, but I would say bluntly no. I don't typically feel super safe. I think I've set up systems for myself that help me feel safer, but no, at a base, like, starting point, I don't think I feel personally safe all the time while running. I think a lot of that for me is very much informed by a lot of the advocacy and activism that I spent a good portion of my life doing, which in college, I was a women's gender and sexuality studies major and did a lot of campus organizing around missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is a really talked about epidemic happening in Native communities across North America. So I think for me, having done essentially 2 to 3 years of research on that in college, but also having just a lot of, I think, real life experiences with violence in my community and extended communities, I think I'm very much informed by my position as a brown Native woman out in the world. And I think in the work that I've done historically leading up to this, I think, we know that based on Department of Justice, but also the Indian Law Resource Center and a couple other places, that 4 in 5 Native women are going to experience violence in their lifetime. And unfortunately, a lot of the counties where the murder rates of Native women and also LGBTQ, two-spirit, trans individuals are really high. A lot of those areas are close to where I live. Albuquerque is notoriously unsafe, I would say, for Native women as an urban space, but also for a lot of my relatives on the reservation. I think there are certainly a lot of concerns around what does it mean to be out and running, in this extremely rural open space where violence against Native women is very common, unfortunately and sadly. And so I think having that background in a lot of that work, and then also having my own experiences, I don't always feel safe, and unfortunately. And I think a lot about what it means, like, to wear certain things on the run. So, what will they see me as, a runner if I'm in, specific gear, like we had kind of mentioned earlier, specific brands that I have on. But if I, were to just hop outside in a t-shirt and basketball shorts, what would that look like? And like, would I be perceived differently? And I think, I think I spent a lot of time thinking about that before the run, which I can't always say is healthy. I would say that is burdensome in terms of mental health. But I also, used to do a lot of traveling for work, and I did a lot of recruitment of Native students for the college I worked for. And so I was constantly on different reservations across the country and in a lot of kind of what we would call border towns where there's a lot of conflict between, white residents and Native residents. And so in those spaces, I oftentimes wouldn't go on a run. So I think for me, it's about making smart choices. My parents have always been really adamant, especially with my dad as a girls track coach, and I think is very aware of the team and like what that meant for us as high schoolers, back when I was there in high school. So I'm lucky that my parents always told me to be really safe and often just came with me. And I think that's a privilege that I would definitely acknowledge, that my parents were supportive of my running. And I definitely feel safest when I'm with my family, and that I'm grateful that running is such a familial activity for us. So even now that I'm grown and out of the house, like, I will meet my parents for a run still. And I think I just rarely run alone because I can't relax a lot of the time mentally, or I will have my partner drive nearby and make sure I just set myself up with pretty heavy planning to ensure that I feel comfortable and I can focus on what I'm doing, as opposed to constantly like looking over my shoulder, because I do enjoy occasionally running on, a trail here or there, or a new path or something. And so, and my parents always told me, running is the best way to get to know a new space. But I think I love to believe that, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. But for many of us, I think there are added questions to that of like, this is a new space, so what can I do to make this space safer for myself right now? And is this the choice? So unfortunately, I think a lot of people of color and also LGBTQ individuals grapple with those questions before they head out on the run, and that is a burden that we carry. And I think it's good that we're having these conversations, but also at the same time, sometimes these conversations don't really impact my day-to-day kind of like safety when I head out there. You gotta face the realities of that, which I think a lot of us can relate to as well. So I definitely think about that. And I have a little sister too, who is only in high school. And so just making sure that when she's on the run as well, that she, has someone with her and is also creating those habits, which just to make sure that, running stays something that we can have as an outlet. And enjoy. And I think there's a lot of Native runners around here, so I'm not like, it's not uncommon to see other folks that look like me in Albuquerque. But that being said, I still think that this is a feeling that a lot of us grapple with. And like I mentioned earlier, that mental safety piece, like, showing up to a 5K, even in Albuquerque, I think there's a lot of times where I'll show up to like Halloween races, and my partner, who is also Navajo, we will often decide, is this person in a headdress or a costume somebody we're going to go up to and talk to? And is our, like, how can we do that, right? And so my partner is a white presenting male, and so he is Navajo as well. And I think we do our best to find ways to leverage his privilege in the space, honestly, to keep us safer in interactions where we may choose to take the time out of our day to educate somebody or have a conversation with somebody about, a costume that they're wearing, or, a racist depiction of Native people on Thanksgiving or something like that. So I think for me, I always go into spaces hoping I don't have to deal with that, but that's part of the mental health safety that I do think about, of like, okay, I'm trying to like PR today. I really hope I don't see a headdress. Like that's like a real reality and thing that I always joke about with other Native runners, because it gets tiring. And we all have these unique little issues, I think, that we deal with that have big consequences on our mental health, that can look different in the different cultures and backgrounds that we come from. But so this is of course just one example of my experience in one space, but it's definitely something that I think about as I head off to races, a space where I'm surrounded by a bunch of people and would be seemingly safe, but obviously that's not the case. So I think that's mostly it. But for me, I just did want to touch on kind of that missing and murdered Indigenous women and LGBTQ and Two-Spirit individuals, because in Native communities, it is a real issue that we are trying to deal with. And there's a lot of jurisdictional issues around who can be prosecuted for murder and assault of Indigenous and people on Native lands. And so I think that is like deeply tied to being outdoors and being somebody who can freely exercise or spend time outside, because a lot of these things happen outside. And so by people who are not, family members, or by people who are maybe coming off the reservation as well, might be the perpetrators. So just, it can be a difficult topic to discuss, but it's something that I want to talk about and bring up, because I think it has always impacted my running, and I know it impacts a lot of my Native friends and relatives as well. So, yeah. Thanks.
So Danae, I wanted to ask you, so you were born and raised in Albuquerque, is that right?
Yeah, and I was.
Do you feel like there's more, how do you feel that the relations are between white people and Native American people in Albuquerque? And I asked you that because I was just wondering if you think, do you feel this way in other places that you might visit and go for runs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Albuquerque is in an interesting place. It's an interesting place, and I think it feels a lot like Phoenix to me as well, where there's some cities, I think, where you're going to get a heavier Native population because of the proximity to reservations, but there are obviously Native people and tribal communities all over North America. So right. I think, I'm lucky that it's a very diverse community here in Albuquerque, and that we're at the cross section of a lot of different cultures. There's large immigrant population. We have a lot of Native communities here. So there's, over 20 federally recognized tribes in New Mexico. And I think there's a lot of diversity here. But that being said, we have a lot of issues with police brutality in Albuquerque as well, against Black and Indigenous individuals. And I think that, we still face a lot of the same issues that most urban areas face in the US. And, you know, we're an interesting state because we've got this urban epicenter, but then we have all these rural communities that are largely reservation lands. I think when I travel, I traveled a lot as a college admission officer, and I found that the hardest places for me to feel safe in were oftentimes those border towns. So places that we know, like places honestly like Gallup, New Mexico, or places that basically are falling right at the edge of a reservation, because those are going to be spaces where a lot of Native people might be doing their grocery shopping or coming on a daily basis, but there's also a lot of white farming, kind of agricultural, you know, residents in the area as well. And there's a lot of culture clashes there, and there's a lot of racism, really like overt racism in those spaces. And so I think, you know, it's just an interesting question and conversation. I think I'm always cautious of where I am, and you know, I think I've pretty much covered it, but it's just the urban space doesn't, you know, make it any safer or anything like that. I think it still translates. The Seattle Indian Health Board, for a resource actually, put out a report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and you know, jurisdiction and things like that. And Albuquerque and Gallup, I believe, were in the top 10 cities for violence against Native women in the US. And so I think just and they're actually both I think they're both in the top 5. And so when I read that report just a few years ago, I think it's hard to take that in and understand, like, okay, this place that I love so much, that is my home, that I feel good in the running community about, isn't always the safest space. So I think that's just doing the work to see how we can make it safer is definitely a priority of mine.
So thank you so much. I mean, you've really told us a lot, and I really appreciate you telling us your heart and just the true reality of what it's like for you as a runner. And yeah, I agree. I think we absolutely have to make it a better space. So thank you. Ezra, you're up.
Yep, absolutely. So I would say I do feel safe. Safety, I guess, in terms of being a person of color when I'm out running is typically not something that I ever thought about. You know, really prior to the Ahmaud Arbery incident, I didn't really think about safety from the perspective of being a person of color out running. And there's some reasons for that in terms of why I feel safe. I mean, obviously I'm a male that's out running, so I don't have the challenges that females might have in terms of feeling safe when they're out running. You know, I do take into account some of the typical safety precautions when I run. You know, watching for traffic, running against traffic, lighting, all that type of stuff. But honestly, no, I really haven't thought about or didn't think about my safety in terms of being a person of color prior to the Ahmaud Arbery incident. And, you know, also a lot of my running is on roads, not on trails. So again, that's another element of safety that I don't have to worry about. Most of the running I do is around my neighborhood. A lot of the times I'm running with a group or friends, but even, you know, half the time I'm out there just running by myself. So safety is typically not something that I've had to think about or have given the time to think about. So certainly feel safe here, but also I travel a lot for work and have had the opportunity to run in various cities across the country and even across the world. I mean, like Danae said, my favorite way to explore or learn a city is to go run it. And I've done that all over the country and all over the world. And really, you know, again, outside of the typical safety precautions, really have not had my color top of mind in terms of the safety when I'm out running. But having said that, you know, I kind of balance that with the fact that, you know, unconsciously as an African-American male, there is that acute awareness that I have of, yes, I am a Black person in America. That doesn't sit well with everybody here. So I am unconsciously aware of that and think about it, but it's not something that I actively think about when I lace up, kind of like what you said earlier. I've typically been of the mindset is if I want to go run, I'm just lacing up and I'm going out and running. I'm not really thinking about I'm going out as a Black male running. I'm just going out running. And even this week when I was in an unfamiliar place earlier this week in Spartanburg, South Carolina, had never been there, wanted to get a couple of runs in. I started out running on the main road by the hotel we were staying. But at some point I decided, hey, I'm going to venture off the main road and go down into some of the neighborhoods. There was a little bit of a pause, and should I do that, especially in light of what happened in the Ahmaud Arbery incident? But I try not to live my life out of fear, and maybe I'm somewhat a little bit stubborn as well. I went and ran through the neighborhoods. No issue. I certainly was being cautious and aware of my surroundings, but I certainly don't like to let that fear prevent me from doing what I want to do. So in general, yes, I do feel safe, but I certainly understand the issues that the other panelists brought up in terms of why they may not feel safe as a runner of color.
Thank you. Awesome. I love to hear that. I mean, I just feel like, we live in America, we're Americans, and I just feel like and I know we all do, we all want everyone to feel comfortable and safe. So Thank you for telling us.
And certainly there's been a little more thought, obviously, in the last couple of weeks and months with all the issues that are going on with Ahmaud Arbery and the other social unrest that's going on. So yes, there's been some more pause in terms of thinking about me as a person of color out there running, but in general, do feel safer.
Awesome. Thank you for telling us about your experiences. Darrell?
I guess similar to Ezra, generally I feel safe when I'm running. I run in familiar areas or often in controlled environments. So it hasn't been an issue for me, and I certainly recognize the privilege that I hold as a male runner. I'm sure it can't even compare to the thoughts that probably women have to think about, because there's situations where I feel extremely safe. I used to run outside in my neighborhood at 4 o'clock in the morning, every morning on a regular basis. I certainly would feel extremely uncomfortable if my wife were to make that same decision. Just again, more of a man to woman difference. I run with nothing. I don't carry a phone. I don't have anything of value, and so I don't feel threatened outside of just the general cars, animals, that type of thing. But certainly, I don't feel a threat from people. Unlike Ezra, though, I would not feel comfortable running. I live in Atlanta. I live in Southwest Atlanta. I'm in a Black neighborhood, predominantly Black neighborhood. I would definitely feel conscious about running in a rural white neighborhood on my own. But I don't do that. So, yeah.
Thank you. You know what? Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think for me as a Black woman, like I was saying, living in America, it feels refreshing to hear those, your thoughts and Ezra's thoughts, because I was kind of feeling like, am I the only Black person that doesn't feel afraid going on a run? The same, we've done our share of traveling around the world and in the US. And one of the first things we do when we get to the hotel is put down our bag and go on a run. And I've never felt like I've never taken pause, probably sometimes to my detriment as a woman, because I've definitely gone on many runs after when the sun begins to go down and I haven't gotten my run in, and I go, and I know I have to put a little bit more thought into my safety as a woman, but as a Black woman, I don't think about it. I just go. So, but like I said earlier, I really want to make sure that what we're doing as a running community allows not only the physical safety, but the mental safety and the space and feeling represented to be something that we can all experience and feel. So I think that these conversations are so important. Thank you for your thoughts. Carolyn has the last question for everybody.
But before we go into the last question, I just want to acknowledge and give a shout out to Shawanna. She just joined us, and it looks like, oh, nope, there we go. Shawanna, it sounded like, did you win something, just some degree?
Oh, yeah, I won the 50K for females. Yeah.
You won for the entire, overall female.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I can't believe I did that, but
That
happy
is
it's over.
amazing.
Like, no big deal. Oh yeah, I just won the 50K for women.
No big deal.
This is Shawanna White, everyone.
Hi guys.
Oh, well, congratulations, and we're glad that you were able to hop on and join. We are just about to get into our last question for the evening, and this question is just open for everyone, anyone to answer. The question is, what changes would you like to see happen in our sport of running to really make our sport not just a sport, but like a community, you know, for everyone?
I would say what I'd like to see, and this probably aligns with just what we're generally seeing in larger conversations around social justice, is to change the narrative as well, to impact the narrative, I guess I should say. First and foremost, representation. I know I would never have set foot on the trail if I had never seen a Moria Lacey or a Myrna Valerio, Joe Gray, Murray Senna. If I had not seen those people, being in their natural, enjoying something that just naturally, they wanted to participate in, I wouldn't have thought that this is something that I could do, or that, okay, why don't I just go ahead and give it a try? So representation, making sure that, if you're a race director and I go to your website to register for your race and I don't see anyone that looks like me, that gives me pause. Or if you're a brand and, I'm looking for, whatever I'm looking for, and I go to your page to look and I don't see myself represented there, that gives me pause. So I think, representation is just very important. And again, you hit on that at the beginning of the call. It just benefits everyone. When I think some of the instances, something that contributed, I think, to some of the instances that we've seen, that occurred over the last couple of weeks, is that people don't expect to see, because they haven't seen it. If you routinely saw or normalized that Black people run, and you may see a Black person out running on the trail, and you're not surprised by that you may not be so inclined to approach someone or profile them or feel like you've got to call and report that. So impacting that narrative by changing what that looks like. And then also, just to bring it down to a more personal level, if you're a running group or you're an organization, and you say you want diversity and you say you want inclusion, prove it. That's kind of the space I'm in right now. I want to see you do the work before, I want to see, when I look at your organization, that you have done that work. You have internally gotten very clear on what your stance is on inclusion. Are the people in your organization clear on what your stance is? I've walked into organizations where the leader is absolutely wanting to have diversity in there and had no idea that there were people in the organization that were not welcoming to that. So being very clear within your organization, and I think Darrell kind of summed it up too, that the outcome or the output of what that, your organization looks like should represent what your values are. I should see that you are an inclusive organization. Otherwise, asking BIPOC people to step into your organization and you've not done that work and you've not represented that, you're not representing that, is to invite them into a harmful space where they are doing the heavy lifting of making you comfortable, and diminishing themselves, again, as Darrell said, not being able to bring their whole self into that space. And the organization, the sport as a whole, loses when we aren't all showing up, adding that diversity, adding that richness to the community. So.
Yeah, I would add on that. There was a quote that I came across when I was thinking about this question from Marian Wright Edelman, who was an activist. It says, you can't be what you can't see. So you can't be what you can't see. So at a minimum, people need usually some type of role model or a mentor or example or some type of stories or images of them that show them doing what they want to do, right, before they can actually do it. So we actually need to have those images out there, as Tammy was talking about. And I think, those of us that are in the sport now, we need to keep doing what we're doing. We need to continue to be out there as role models. We need to keep posting on Facebook and Instagram and wherever else and highlighting the fact that we are in this community and we are taking advantages of this community. And we need to keep encouraging others to come alongside us in this community. But more important to that, to go back to what was said just a minute ago, the people that are in control, those race directors, the brands and whatnot, like she said, they need to change the standard of what they are showing in the media and the advertisements and the sponsorships that they're out there, because those standards become reality, right? So if that's all that people see, that's all that they're going to know. So that needs to change fundamentally from a running organizational perspective.
I love that, Ezra. Those standards become reality. Exactly. Like what we can't be what we don't see. 100%. Thank you.
Yeah. And, you know, I so agree with what you were saying in the sense that, you know, whether we wanted to or not, we are in this space, and in some way, shape, or form, we all have somewhat of a platform. And I think that it can be such a positive and wonderful thing for people to see people of color running and finding joy in it and accomplishing goals, whatever they might be. But, you know, you never know who you're going to touch, and you never know what child or adult is going to see you. And in the Black community, especially, I'm just going to use that as an example. We deal with so many health issues with high blood pressure and diabetes and obesity and all these things. And so, you know, it's gone to a point where we have a responsibility to uplift and to show that running can be not only fun, but it can be, you know, really important for your health. And so if we help one person on their journey and show them that it's, you know, it's for you, that, you know, you can do this too, then I think that is just such a positive thing. So.
And in that vein, I think that it's super important that running gives back to the community. And what I mean by that is, I think that there's been a very obvious running boom with people that are, well, I call myself a hobby runner. It's not always a super popular term, but a lot of people are signing up for road races, and there's been an explosion of local races popping up. It is, let's just name it, is super profitable. And at the same time, what I would really hope is that that running as an activity coming from the race directors and from the other businesses that are invested in this running explosion, to also give back to the community, to invest in youth, because it is so important to invest in mentoring this next generation to help create gatherings of where it can be safe, and mentoring them through the mental toughness of what it means to run, right? And that's not just like yeah, you're going to run this 5K, you feel like your lungs are on fire and you might poop yourself, or, you know, like it, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff related to running that, you know, we have to mentally prepare ourselves for. But it's also about talking through those things of, what does it mean to be safe when you're running? What do you look out for? How do you plot out a map of where it is that you're going to explore? What happens when you go to a place that has no signal? And these are things that I feel very strongly as being safeguards until this hopeful someday where there's a very normalized sense of truly having a diverse running community that's also really truly represented in what the media shows as well. And I agree absolutely that from the media and from brands, there has to be a really intentional examination of what it means to have a look for running. And if you have a look for running, I would argue you also have a look for your leadership. And you have to examine what your leadership looks like, because if your leadership is what's determining what a look looks like, and everybody looks predominantly the same on that leadership board, and they're the ones okaying the images and okaying the marketing campaigns, funding those things, paying the money, then again, I wonder how truly diverse that particular group is that's making the calls. And I think that right now we are in a really, truly wonderful time for pushing the envelope on those things. We're questioning already so much. And yes, it's a really painful reckoning for some, and maybe uncomfortable for others, but it's important. And I think it's important to acknowledge those feelings and examine, why are we uncomfortable? Why is this so painful? And if those are the feelings that I feel, and they're predominantly negative, but could I grow from it? Is there a way that I can emerge from this with a better understanding of how things could be and how to implement that into a reality?
Wow. Okay. I feel like we could keep talking. Well, we do have some questions that maybe we can get to in 5 to 10 minutes.
Yes, I know. It seems like we could talk for hours, and I know everybody's, we've got lives to live and Saturday nights to kind of continue on with. So anyway, I did get some questions. We got some questions on Insta Story, and then there's also a couple questions here. Well, there's actually one. Okay, so Grace sent a question. Thank you, Grace, for being here. And she said, she thanks us for all of our insights today. And her question is, the image of running in the US, does it match the more diverse reality that we already know exists? What can we as individual runners do to help change that image?
I think that my suggestion would be to change the channel. If the image that you're seeing isn't a reflection of the sport that you love or you're participating in, change the channel. Because there are podcasts out here and YouTube channels and publications and magazines and running groups that are projecting the diversity of the sport. And to impact the people that aren't, you have to stop supporting them, stop buying their magazines, stop watching their shows. And when we live in a capitalist society, which is about capital, it's about equity, money, ownership. When you start hurting their pockets, then they will adjust or they won't survive.
Excellent. I mean, I think I couldn't have said it better. I mean, or any of us. That was awesome. Darrell, thank you for that answer. I've got a couple other quick questions as we're wrapping things up. One of the questions is, what would you like to see from running brands beyond just diverse representation for appearances? So what do we want to see the brands do? I think, if I'll just jump in really quick, I think one of the things is it really has to start internally. What does your board look like? What do your executives look like? Because if your executives are all white, then you're just gonna have that one narrative and that one narrow point of view. I think the brands need to diversify from within the people that are making the big decisions.
Yeah, I would agree with that and say that, it's one thing to just switch out all the pictures on your Instagram as a brand, right? And it's a different thing to hire people of color, hire LGBTQ individuals, hire people who can basically pay people for this knowledge that you're already typically asking them to provide for you on social media. And I think that that's, it's not really meant to be there as a Band-Aid, just hiring people of color and then hoping that they'll do the work doesn't always work. And I think that's something that I've learned even out in higher education, is that that's not a fix if there's not really infrastructure there to support people of color. But that is why I think that there has to be this sort of reckoning and acknowledgement with where you stand as a brand in the first place. It's like what Darrell said, we live in a capitalist society. So what's the end goal there? It's typically to make money. It's not to put money or resources back into the community. And so a lot of the advocacy work of, I would say, some of the Native runners that I follow has to do with, acknowledging the land, acknowledging the tribal communities, acknowledging people of color, acknowledging the spaces, and doing the work behind that to educate yourself without burdening people of color, but then also at the same time finding a way to pay people of color to, have voices and spaces and platforms. So, it's difficult. I always hesitate to say that, like, the system is broken and it wasn't, it's the reality is it wasn't really made for us in the first place. So it's working exactly as it was meant to work, like, in this structure. And so I would say, if you can, share voices out there that are doing this work, like, Carolyn's page, Diverse We Run, and like some of these things that we all engage in, because that is a good way, we can get started on this stuff. But I mean, obviously I would love for brands to acknowledge communities of color, put money back into those communities, uplift young people, show different body types, like, tell, diverse stories. But that isn't often the reality, because money is what is the end goal typically. So I think it's often up to us in our communities. It's not always, an easy task, but it's something that I think many of us are committed to changing long term.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janae. That was an awesome answer. And I mean, there's so many good thoughts and ideas that we have going on tonight. I want to talk about, there's a question that came in from Liz a few minutes ago, and it's kind of long, but I want to read it because this is valid. Very, very good question. She said, yes to everything you have said regarding the first question. She said, my team is going through these discussions. I'm a minority runner on a competitive running team where BIPOC are less than 15% of the membership. We've faced some vocal pushback on even having discussions regarding inclusion and racial equity on our team, which made BIPOC members feel shut down, trivialized, or like our experiences were not important. Members pushing back argue that according to our team's non-discriminatory statement, we are inclusive because we don't discriminate based on race, gender, identity, religion, etc. The question is, how do we talk with these members? Do we even try to bring them on board? Leave that work to a white ally? And then lastly, she said, we are finally discussing on how to diversify our team, but aren't sure where to start, how to make this process feel genuine versus tokenism, which we know about, right? We don't want that. Authentic and meaningful for our fellow BIPOC who we want to see on our team. And she'd love any suggestions. So that was kind of long, but I think so important.
I think that's a great question. I have a lot to say on that, but I'm going to try to stay brief. I think the first question or point she brought up about the members of her team being reluctant to even have the conversation, I think a lot of times that comes because if you are a member, like a lot of times members of the dominant section or the majority section don't want to feel like they are guilty. Like on one hand, sometimes they're willing to admit some of the issues that are faced by any minority group, but they don't want to feel like they're being lumped into the problem. And I think that in order to have a genuine conversation, that has to be the first step, that you have to recognize that you may be a member of that problem. The closest thing, I'm a minority by race, but by being a male, like that puts me in a majority situation a lot of times. And so when I hear issues that affect women, it's easy to recognize like, man, that shouldn't happen or to feel bad. But sometimes I also have to think to myself like, okay, but how am I also contributing? Because now I have to think about what I need to do differently to make that space safer, to make space safer for women. What are things that I might have done wrong? Where are inadequacies that I have or biases that I hold? And a lot of people aren't willing to make that step. And I think that it's going to be difficult for her team to have that discussion if those members are not willing to accept the possibility that there's something that they may need to do to change. Like in all of this conversation that we've been having and conversations I've been having, like, in my local conversations, a lot of it, people try to put the onus on the oppressed. I tell them an issue about what's happening to the Black community, for example, and it's like, well, that's why we have to get out and vote. And that's why, well, see, you're putting the onus back on me. I'm not expressing this issue for you to tell me what I need to do to fix my situation of being oppressed by someone else. That's something for them to change. But if they want to change, they have to want to change. It's hard to get someone to want to change. So I think while her question is a really good question, I don't know what the answer is other than compassion. And I don't know how to make people compassionate. That's just something people have to come to on their own, I think.
It's an uncomfortable topic, but if that group is not comfortable getting uncomfortable to talk about it, like Darrell said, you might need to change the channel. You might need to do something else, find a different team.
For me, I'm part of a running club, and I am definitely a minority on that running club, and I'm really invested in hopefully changing what that running club looks like and who it's comprised of, with a variety of different voices, different stories, and what we all look like. And I'm not gonna lie, I lean on white allies. And that's mostly a function of ensuring that I feel heard. And that also is a product of just what I've experienced as an adult, mostly feeling like sometimes I might say something and I don't necessarily feel heard. And it's not to say that that's exactly what I feel in the running club, but it's what I lean on because that has basically become part of my way of operating in a lot of spaces. And I think that it's important to have conversations with as many people that are willing to listen. And if they're not, then they're not. And for those that are willing to listen and are eager to take action based on what it is that they hear and they're learning, then that is a win. I do think it's absolutely a win when people are listening and they internalize and want to then pursue some course of action. And also, I feel very strongly that based on what I agree that based on what, Darrell and Ezra have said, there's a lot of the burden that can feel like is placed on the person of color or the person that's oppressed, right? And I think that it's really important to say that it's also not your job as that person of color to take all of that on, especially if that's not something that you're willing to do. And if it's not working, then change the channel. It's not always super easy, right? It could mean that you have to reconcile certain kinds of things. Maybe it's the relationships, but if you have to change the channel for your own personal well-being, then that's what needs to be done. But I'm all for leveraging relationships.
Yeah. And I think that is where we talked at the top of the call about this is that intersection where people do turn the channel and we lose that voice in that organization. So clearly this is an organization where we talk about safety and inclusion that cannot exist in this space where this individual does not feel like they can have this conversation. So this is an organization that has not done the work. For this individual's personal safety and sanity and emotional wellness, they may make the decision that, you know what, I don't want the burden of having to try to figure this out for, navigate their feelings and my feelings. This is the juncture where we lose that diversity and richness of the sport because of that lack of being able, like Darrell said, that compassion that I can't teach you to have that. And honestly, the burden is, it's been too long and sometimes it's just too much. It's for your own personal, health, you will walk away and no one won in that situation. I mean, she will have won obviously because she's walked away and she's for her person, but she will have, no one won in that situation. And and again, it's because an organization that has not done the work to truly say, to be what they say they are. and to do the work to have what they want. And I would only add to that, you know, yeah, again, I think Darrell summed it up. If they can't do that work, then at this point, we're changing the channel. And that's unfortunate. No one wins there, but I understand it.
Thank you, Tammy. Yeah, this is an ongoing problem, I think, for a lot of groups and people, and there's a lot of work to be done. I think we have time for one more question, and then I know we have to wrap it up, but I wanted to get to this because I wanted to, it talks about hope. And I think we all want to walk away feeling like there is some hope, but this person's question is, how do you access hope when you feel the fight for inclusion and diversity is too much? How do you access hope?
I would say really quickly, and I'll turn it over to everybody else. I would say, because honestly, for every negative experience, every time I put my foot on the trail, I meet amazing people. There are amazing people in the running community of every creed, race, size, rate, spiritual, culture, everything. So that keeps me coming back. That keeps me trying. That keeps me reaching out. That keeps me, willing to try one more group, or, or show up for one more run, or, give this race a try, or go for a run in the city. There are amazing people out there. And as Connie said, there are allies out there who are, really stepping up and lending their voice to these conversations. And that's very encouraging, and it gives me hope. Yeah.
Yeah, I would add to that and say, yes, I totally agree with you, Tammy. And I certainly feel the same way, that I've had the opportunity to meet so many close friends through running. And I think that is certainly one thing that's kept me going. But I also think I turn a lot of how I view running back towards my culture and like my values that I was sort of raised with. And I know not everyone was raised in, an indigenous household or with certain, we all come from different backgrounds and mindsets, but I think something that I always bring it back to the land, sort of in terms of being grateful for why I'm here in the first place, and how I'm able to run in the first place. And I'm a runner that suffers from a chronic pain. So I have accessory navicular syndrome. And so for me, running isn't always super easy. I suffer from a lot of foot pain, and it has been just a journey. And so I think knowing that getting out the door every day isn't always a given for me. I always bring it back to like, who am I running this for right now? And so I spend a lot of time, and this is potentially something that someone out there listening can apply to their own daily life, that as a Navajo person, for me, I was taught that running is something that you do to pray for other people. It's your way of physically connecting to the ground beneath you and physically connecting with the sky above you, right? And so I think if you think about it just in a more practical level, like I run thinking about other people. I run thinking about, that I'm grateful for some of these spaces I pass every day, but I'm grateful that they're always there for me, right? Through rain or shine, or through a bad day or a celebratory good day. A run, it's always there to make me happier when I'm happy, and also help me when I'm sad or down. And I think, or bring up a boring day. And I think that's something we can all relate to, but something that keeps me going in that is I always think about other people while I'm running, and usually somebody specific. I like to dedicate my runs to people, and I like to be intentional about going out to run. This isn't just for me and my personal health. This is me making a habit of being grateful for the people around me, and for being grateful for my upbringing and my values, and for the for this sport I get to, also value as a part of my culture, so it has a dual purpose for me in that sense. But I hope that people can find some inspiration when they step out the door and know that, we have to take care of the earth, because we can't run if there's no earth there for us. And so I really think that that's just something that keeps me going every day, is like, I need to care and put back energy and resources into the land as much as possible, because it gives me so much every day as a runner. So, yeah.
When I'm having just a stressful day, I'm having a good day, I'm having a minute day, I'm going out for a run. It is that action that brings me a sense of relief and also gives me a sense of hope. And so just running in of itself is something that gives me all of the good feelings, and in a very Legally Blonde, it gives me endorphins, and I'm not going crazy kind of way. And also, at the same time, I think a lot about just occupying space when I'm running as a female, sometimes when it's super hot with my shirt off, whatever it is that I look like, what my body looks like, just occupying that space. I too, like just about everybody, I would say, like on this panel, we run to get to know a new place. We run to explore. We run to feel good. Like, I do all of those things too. And all of the places that running has taken us, it's a way of connecting with that space. It's a way of just showing up to that community, whoever it is that might live there too. And it in of itself is also a way of normalizing what an activity just looks like in that space. And I think that that is so important. I think that continuing to do what it is that brings you joy, I do think that, again, safety can mean a variety of different things for different people, and whether that's running solo, running together, running on a trail or road, whatever kinds of precautions that you might take so that you can feel fully present in that activity is just really important. And I noticed in the chat too that Grace pointed that the act of running itself is an act of resistance. And I agree with that, because there are some spaces that may not necessarily feel super accessible to everyone, but by showing up, you are challenging that. Running through that space, you are challenging that. And so again, I go back to this idea of you show up, you go for a run, and also you have this idea of giving back. And that might be as little as, I'm going to post this picture of me running in this kind of a space on social media so somebody can see that and go, I can run in that kind of a space. Somebody did that, right? Or it could mean something more involved. It could mean mentorship in a different kind of way. But there's so many different ways in which we can connect with people in this day and age that I think it's really important to leverage all of that.
I was just going to add real quick. I mean, just in general, I mean, there's, from my perspective, there's a lot of room for hope. I mean, in general, the running community is awesome. I mean, I've had great experiences with a ton of people in the running community. I run with a lot of predominantly white running groups. I also run a lot with our Black Men Run chapter here locally in Phoenix. But at the end of the day, I mean, when we're on the track doing 400 or 800 repeats or doing that 20 miler during marathon training on the weekends, people are just supportive of you as an individual. And I know there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of inclusion and diversity and just making the picture of running great to everybody. But in general, the people that are there, the people that we engage with and people that we meet in and at races have been fantastic, at least in my perspective.
All right, guys, thank you so much for all you guys' awesome answers. We're gonna go ahead and start wrapping things up, but before we go, can you guys, oh man, my brain is like shot. Sorry. Do you have any social media, website, email that you want to leave with the viewers so they can get in touch with you? And we'll start with Tammy first.
I am Run Live Love 2 on Instagram. I have a private page. I'm weird like that. So I love connecting with runners. I follow most of them. So You can find me, again, Run, Live, Love, the number 2. I am rarely on Facebook, so I won't even bore you with that. And yeah, I lead a hiking group called Wander Women of Georgia. If you're in Georgia and you're looking to hike, look for me on Meetup. And yeah, I'd love to connect with any of you.
Oh, awesome. What part of Georgia, Tammy?
I am in, I would say Atlanta, but you know how that goes.
Okay.
Atlanta,
I know.
adjacent.
I'm going to have to make sure the next time I'm in town that I hit you up for a hike.
I know. I've seen you here a few times having brunch and things, and I'm like, what is up with this? Like,
I had no idea you was in Atlanta area. All right, I may butcher this order, guys, but Connie, we're going to go with Connie next.
Thank you. On Instagram, I'm Connosaurus Rex because I really like dinosaurs, although very few dinosaurs actually show up on my page. You can find me, I believe I have a public profile on Strava as well. I've found quite a few really good friends through running and through zooming in on Strava in the creepiest way possible. But I definitely invite people to slide into the DMs for Instagram in case you want to just chat. You might get a lot of 2 a.m. messages just because of my toddler not sleeping through the night. But very much like Tammy, I welcome conversations with some delays on my end. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Connie. All right, Danae, you're up next.
Yeah, so you can definitely follow me on Instagram at Danae_pink22. Pink is also my favorite color. So I think, so follow me on Insta. I think I'm public on there, but I post a lot about issues across Indian country. I post a lot about issues regarding racism in sports. And a little bit of like personal stuff here and there, but mostly about running. I also have a profile on Strava, Danae Dormy on there, so either one works. But yeah, I think I'll drop mine in the chat since my name is kind of hard to spell.
Okay, thank you, girl. All right, up next, Ezra.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram, easy_runs_az. That's my social media outlet for running. So primarily all running information, a little bit of personal stuff as well, but easy_runs_az on Instagram. Also, I'm the co-captain of the local Phoenix Black Men Run chapter. So you guys can connect with us on Instagram as well, Black Men Run Phoenix. We've also got a Facebook page, Black Men Run Phoenix as well. And then if you're in the Phoenix area, feel free to come out and join us for a run at any time. It's open to anyone and everyone.
Oh, nice. I'm thinking about running the Mesa. Is it called the Mesa Half Marathon in Phoenix?
Yep, Mesa Half. Mesa
yeah.
I'm an ambassador for the race, so if you need a discount code, I can get you a discount. Anybody on the call, hit me up on Instagram, and I can get you a discount to register for the Mesa Phoenix Half or full marathon next February.
All right. Nice. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Sorrel.
Ezra, I'm going to take you up on that. Shawanna, you never cease to amaze me. But the fact that you just won a 50K and are now hosting from the car is, I don't have words for that. You are a crazy woman.
I know.
But I'm not on social media, so I don't have social media. I do have a website, Darrell Patterson. No, I'm lying. DarrellRuns.com. DarrellRuns.com. It's probably the easiest way to find me. I do have a Strava account. I don't know what my name is. I think it's just Darrell Patterson on Strava.
Yeah, it's Darrell Patterson.
Thank you.
And you also have a...
I do have a YouTube channel as well. Thank you. I have a YouTube channel that I don't know the address for. So the easiest way to get to my YouTube channel is, again, probably just to go through my website, DarrellRuns.com, and you'll see a link to my YouTube channel.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Well, you guys, this has been honestly amazing. I mean, it's just been, such a meaningful conversation, and to meet and talk. And I hope that our audience has gotten so much out of this. I know you guys have, and I just feel, really happy that we were able to make this work, and we're just excited about the future. And I just want to say that I feel so much hope in my heart. I mean, I love this sport so much. I've been running my entire life. I've met some of the most amazing people. I have some of my closest friends are runners, and I've been able to just gain so much from this sport in so many ways, from mentors and coaches and people and friends, and social media is like a whole other aspect that has been really positive. So I feel hopeful that we can move forward and make this sport even better and more diverse and different voices. And so I'm just really happy to be a part of it. Thank you guys for being here. I'm going to put it over to Carolyn, but if you guys don't know me, you can find me anywhere. Nat Runs Far, Instagram. I do tweet. I love to tweet. Facebook, my blog, whatever. So thank you guys so much. This has been amazing. I hope we can do it again.
Thank you all. And really quickly, Shawanna, your Instagram is Peach Runner 26.2.
Yes, Peach Runner 26.2. I am also on Strava, Shawanna White. That's SHAWANNA, and white, like the color. And yeah, and I'm on Facebook, but I don't really talk about too much running on Facebook. So just go to the Instagram and Strava.
Yes, thank you. And I am Carolyn. My personal account is at I Run for the Glory. But, at Diverse We Run is really the main, I think, the more important Instagram account. And really this panel here tonight is the manifestation of my heart and my vision behind Diverse We Run, which is just to amplify and to give platform, to all the runners of color, and to amplify your voices, your stories. And and I'm just so grateful for everyone who showed up here tonight. Really quickly, for the video of tonight, it should be ready to go hopefully within the next 24 hours. And there will be a link to this video via YouTube that will be posted in the profiles of definitely in Diverse We Run, but I think also Natalie and everyone else here potentially. I don't want to speak for everyone. Sorry, I just totally claimed your your profile spot, but definitely it will be in the bio for Diverse We Run. And like Natalie said, hopefully, we will have more of these in the future. Thank you, Shawanna and Natalie, both for coming up with this amazing idea. And thank you all 5 panelists for giving of your time and really just of who you are in preparing for this talk tonight and for spending your Saturday evening here. So I'll see everyone on the internet.
Congratulations. Oh, thank you, Connie. All right, good night, guys.
Good night, you guys.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.